Welcome aboard, folks. I'm Stephen Malkowich, your captain on this adventure called Ship of Fools. I'm a fool. Lucky for you, I'm not sailing solo. Join me and a boatload of people, all just trying to make sense of this crazy world. It's a fabulous mess, and you're invited. I'd like to welcome everyone to Ship of Fools, where wit meets wisdom. We have in the house Dr. Laurel Weldon, who is currently the Dean of SFU's Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences and a distinguished professor, very distinguished. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is that you, well, obviously you're very well educated and an academic is one, and I always enjoy speaking with academics. And I'm curious too, because the social sciences, we alluded to this at the very beginning, are, I believe, I don't want to say a much maligned area. I just don't believe that the right amount of focus and energy is applied to them, and people do not, I say the general population do not understand how important the social sciences are.
I think that's fair.
You know, yeah. and because there's so many facets to the social sciences. Mm-hmm. You were talking a little bit about how many departments under you have. Mm-hmm. What was that number?
Yeah. Well, it's 30 departments and programs. So okay. Depending on how you count them, 19 departments, mm-hmm. 11 programs of various kinds.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big.
It is. It's a very big job.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the thing that I guess there was a couple of things in going through, but what we're going to do is I want to start off with your background. Okay. And we alluded to that a little bit. Let's start with that.
Sure.
I'm going to call you doctor.
You call me, it's fine. Call me Laurel.
I like doctor better.
Okay.
Laurel.
My advisor used to always say, my PhD advisor used to always say, her name was Iris Young. She used to always say, well, you can call me Professor Young if it makes you feel like you're getting your money's worth, but also you can call me Iris.
So Laurel, mm-hmm. Let's start with where you were born, first of all. Yeah. And you're Canadian, but you've gone back and forth across that border a few times. Mm-hmm. So let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Stanford University Hospital.
Okay.
Because my mom, who just passed away this past summer, my mom was doing her Master of Laws at Stanford, Masters of Comparative Law. Stanford University. And she finished that up, and then she had me in the hospital. Uh-huh. My dad was there doing his PhD in statistics.
Statistics.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long did you spend there?
I don't really remember it. Yeah. They came back when I was quite young. My mom came back to do her articling in Toronto.
In Toronto. Okay.
And my dad came back briefly after that. He finished his PhD and then came back, yeah.
And then your school years, like your
Oh, I moved around. So I started off, I actually was went to a daycare in Toronto when my mom was articling that's still there today called Mothercraft. It's a research institute for infant research. It's funny, I had a graduate student who went off and took a job there, and I was like, wait a minute, you're taking a job at Mothercraft? I was their first baby.
So you're like a guinea pig.
I was a guinea pig. I was a guinea pig a lot, and when I was young, I think it was fun. But yeah, so I went to that daycare back when it was a kind of an experimental infant lab of some kind. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever find out what they were?
No, I mean, I don't think they were doing anything too weird. I think it was more like just, we used to have something called like the lab at Purdue, a kids' daycare called the Lab, which was really kind of a training ground for, child care experts and like graduate students who wanted to study child development. So it's more things like showing you different colors and seeing what kinds of things you liked. Mm-hmm. And I remember participating in one experiment when I was a bit older, where they moved a bunch of wood blocks one way and then the other, and then they switched the colors and like asked me which one was on the top and which one was on the bottom, and I just thought they were really stupid. Yeah. I was like, the pink one is still on the top, or whatever it was. It was just like, just because you moved it around, it's still the same, it's not changed. So yeah.
So you were in Toronto?
Yeah.
And
we went to Halifax.
And you went to Halifax?
Nova Scotia, yeah.
Okay.
My mom and dad both, well, my mom was pregnant with my brother at that time. My dad took a job at Dalhousie. He was teaching in biostatistics. Mm-hmm. And my mom eventually ended up teaching, she did articling in Nova Scotia too, or whatever not articling, took the bar there. And she worked for the city of Halifax, and she also taught at Dalhousie Law School. She was the first woman and the youngest person ever to teach at Dalhousie Law School.
Very cool.
Yeah, on the faculty.
On faculty, that's very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So when did you come from an academic background?
I certainly do.
No question about that. When did you, at what age were you at when you said, hey, you know what, this is going to be, or, because I'm always interested in this because I'll speak about myself.
Yeah.
I flirted with getting my master's.
Yeah.
But then I started to go, I don't know if I want to do that. My middle sister got her master's, but and in counseling. But I don't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I'm always interested in that transition from, when you're okay, you go there. And it was what started off for me was I was taking the liberal arts. Okay, but my major was in political science and economics, trying to understand those things. That
shows good judgment.
Yeah, and I truly enjoyed it. I really did, and I had no intention of getting an honors degree in that. I really didn't, but it just through happenstance. And as you get into your third and fourth year, the classes become smaller and smaller and smaller, and you have less places to hide, and you really have to you really have to not only read, you have to digest and understand the information or the content that you're reading about, and then usually writing about too, and then discussing. And I'm not suggesting it was easy, but at that time too. There was political science or computer science courses too, classes being offered too. Yeah. So I signed up for one of those, and stupid me, I didn't realize that computer science was largely math. Okay, like there was mathematical things, and not that I was struggling, but the first paper that I wrote, somebody, and this haunts me to this day because someone wrote on my paper, I want an F and A. On my paper, and I got called to the professor's office, and I was just dumbfounded when he threw this, and it was written in red felt marker, and I looked at him and said, "Do you think I'm that stupid?" Like I was like 18 years old, going like, well, you obviously did. And I started arguing with him and then ended up just dropping the class because I couldn't, because there was 300 kids in that class.
Right.
And it was one of my regrets though.
Yes, I know. These things, the paths are not taken.
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting I would have been, Sergey Brin or whatever, it wouldn't have mattered, but it was just one of those things. And I went like, do you think that little of me that I'm going to write that? So somebody had scribbled on, just as a joke. And you know what? Shit happens. Things like that happen. But anyway, so and then let's get into, now that where did you graduate from high school?
Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia.
Halifax Grammar School.
And at that time, you made the decision that you were going to obviously pursue a post-secondary education.
I definitely wanted to go to university. My dad was a big... he didn't want any of his kids just to go to university by default. Mm-hmm. He didn't think it was a good idea. He thought, so he gave me a lot of questions about why I was thinking about going to university. And he did that, for me and for my sisters and brother. And I think in some ways it's kind of funny to have, in my case, it was good because I was, me and my peers, everybody was going to go to university. No one was sitting around saying, I'm not going to go to university. It wasn't an option for my peer group, the people that I was hanging out with. So it was good to get asked some questions about what do you think this is going to do for you? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
So that was good. But no, I definitely was going to go. It would be pretty hard I was pretty serious academic.
Mm-hmm. And had you decided what school you were going to go to? Or?
No. I really wanted to go to University of Toronto, actually, because both my parents went there. And
it is the big smo.
And also being in Halifax in a smaller town, I think I didn't want to go to the university that was kind of, a lot of the kids from my high school went to Dalhousie. And I think for me, it felt like very, very close to home. And my mom, I say my mom and my dad are both kind of expansive people, have like a big kind of global brain. And I think I felt from them that it would be kind of, I didn't get kind of local thinking from them. They were both kind of encouraging me to think more broadly. So, and because we had family in Toronto and went back to Toronto all the time, it didn't feel like it was impossible or far away or that kind of thing.
So you go to University of Toronto. Are you right into the social sciences right then, or no? What did you do?
No, well, it's so funny, right? This goes to your point about like what you think when you're young. So I was 16 when I went to university. I turned 17 almost right away.
So you're a brainiac.
No, I was very young. I just started young. So I was very young. And, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, I was pretty good at science and math in high school. So I was thinking, but I liked, social sciences and things. And I liked art. And basically, somebody said to me, be an architect. I didn't want to be an architect. And then I decided I wanted to be a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
And the reason I wanted to be a psychiatrist and not a psychologist was I thought this way I could help people. But then somebody said, well, if you're a psychologist, you can't prescribe drugs. And so I was like, well, I don't want to be the kind of person who I come up to help somebody and what they really need is some drugs and I can't do it. So I better get a medical degree. So I decided to go to medical school. Me and every other person at the University of Toronto in the first year is trying to get into U of T medical school. It's completely nuts. There's all these people who are, studying and making themselves sick, staying up all night and doing all that kind of stuff. And that wasn't the kind of person that I was. I was just kind of like floating around thinking maybe I'll go to medical school alongside all these people whose life's dream was brilliant, hardworking people who was like their ambition to go to medical school. And so I was in all the classes that you take when you're going to medical school, math, chemistry, physics, biology.
Sciences.
Yeah.
Science.
And my elective was political science.
Okay. Oh. Cool. Like that's interesting because like I was... My elective was rocks and stars, just to get that out of the way, the science.
Yeah,
anyway.
I used to call it rocks for jocks at UT.
Yeah. But okay, so you start off with an aspirations, obviously in the sciences, but with a aspiration.
I didn't really want to be a scientist. I wanted to be a I wanted to help people. I had this idea like I'm going to help people. I'm going to listen to their problems. I don't know why. I would have been a terrible psychologist or a psychiatrist, a health counselor. I don't know why I thought that was something I was going to be good at it. Would have been I would have been terrible in that job. But that's kind of what I wanted to do. And so that was where I was aiming. I wasn't wanting to do like research in biology or something like that. That wasn't something I wanted to do. But I took political science and as my elective, and I really liked it. I really, really liked it. I had the first class I took was political theory. I had this fantastic professor called Kontos. His last name was Kontos, and he was so popular that everyone was crowding into his classes, and people were, jamming the hallways, and no one could get into his classes, and you had to like wait outside for a seat and hope that you could get in. And some people were like just listening from the door, and it was a huge fire hazard. They eventually told us we wouldn't all be allowed to stay in the class. And yeah, he was great. He was very entertaining. He was very interesting. He read like Machiavelli and Locke, and he made them all so interesting. And I was just riveted.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is like the stuff that's really setting me aflame. Why am I struggling through this incredibly boring first year biology class where they had this thing called like diversity of life, where you'd have to go and like look at all these bones and memorize the categorization, and it just didn't feel very interesting to me.
So after that first year,
I switched. Second year, I went into political science first, major in political science. So
and when you went in that direction, what within the political science end of things, where were you kind of leaning towards?
Well, in those days, I took kind of the big classes that you had to take. So I took, Canadian politics, which I loved learning about. It was really interesting. I had great professors at U of T. And I had Janice Stein for international relations. She's
still kicking.
She's a real insightful person, and she was a fantastic professor. She also had like massive numbers of people in her classes. We had our class in Convocation Hall. If you've ever been to U of T, it's really huge.
Is she still involved with the Monk?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. Yeah. She's great. Yeah. So so I had her and those classes really, and also I had a TA that reached out to me in that first year, and said to me in my classes, like I handed in some paper which I actually had worked on a little bit, but it was like a one-page paper, which was new to me. I wasn't used to writing those short papers. And he said to me, this paper's okay, but I think from your discussions in tutorial that you can do a lot better and that you're really good at this. And that just like a little reaching out to me and saying, I think you're good. That made the world of difference to me also. And I think, you think it's so consequential, these little things you say to students or to anybody in life, right? Yeah. Any young person just needs a little bit of encouragement sometimes. Like you said, the professor who reached out to you and that you still remember, I think about that all the time, that was a TA who did that. Yeah. And he made a huge difference to my life and my experience of university, feeling seen,
Yeah. And that's, and I also, like for me, personally, my university experience opened up my eyes. Like I grew up in southern Manitoba, and going to the University of Manitoba, which was a big school, and it really it opened my eyes up to concepts that I never Jesus. I use this as an example. I think I was 2 weeks in, and I went to hold the door. I grew up in a family. If you didn't hold the door open for your mother, you got your ear turned. Like for a woman, like if you went through. And I remember opening up the door into UMSU, University of Manitoba Students' Union Hall, and the woman behind me would not go through.
Yes,
and
I remember those days.
I remember those days, and going
did the crazy dance, the do-si-do by the door.
I'm like, and then I'm expecting my mother to come around the corner and twist my ear and make me go back outside, hold the door open again. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
and I'm not going to get into an argument, and I did though. I got into an argument about it, but regardless, it exposed me to so much.
Yeah,
and that's a lot. That's a huge part of
university should do, right?
That's what it should do.
Yeah,
that's what it should do.
Stretch your mind.
Stretch your mind. That's
push
right.
you in new ways.
That's right.
Teach you new things.
Yeah, and I was extremely fortunate, very fortunate. But okay, so you're following along the political science track. You're at the University of Toronto.
Yeah.
And
so in my second year, I'm living in Toronto and in residence, and by second year I was pretty sure I liked political science. I knew that was what I wanted to do, and I decided to go out to stay with my dad in the summer. My dad was teaching at Simon Fraser still. And so, I shouldn't say still, he was teaching at Simon Fraser. So I came out to Simon Fraser. I came out to stay with dad for the summer because I hadn't seen him as much and I wanted to spend time with my dad and kind of being out west. I loved Vancouver. So I came out here to spend the summer with him and I just loved it. I just felt like, why am I in Toronto? This place is the place for me. I remember sitting on the SkyTrain back in the day and looking at the mountains and just thinking, what a great place this is. I really feel good here. Like I feel connected. I want to stay here. So I decided I wanted to stay here. So I transferred to Simon Fraser and I finished my undergraduate degree at Simon Fraser. And actually it was great. Because Simon Fraser in those days, and still this is the case, had much smaller classes than I had at U of T. Even at the lower levels, the classes were a lot smaller. And I had really kind of dedicated professors. It was a really good feel. Like I had I was really close friends with my cohort of political science students and philosophy students. I had political science and philosophy. We were a really kind of tight-knit group and had a lot of fun together and spent a lot of time sitting in the pub talking about everything, every kind of issue you can imagine. And so, it was just really pretty idyllic. In those days, the beer garden used to be out behind. It was called the beer garden, but it was like the coffee place, right? Yeah. The student pub was out where Maggie Benson is right now. And you'd go out there and sit in the sun. I mean, a lot of the people who were at SFU in that era will now reminisce about this period. When you just go up there, you just walk into the pub. You knew that there'd be people there. You get coffee, hang out, go sit in the sun. It was a very nice feeling, very nice community. Very interesting, a lot of varied opinions on campus. There was a Marxist-Leninist reading group, and also conservative student groups. We had international students from Iran and Norway. There was a social democratic students group. I mean, there was just every kind of idea on campus. It was at the time of the South African kind of protests against South African apartheid. There was that kind of stuff going on. It was a very, there was a lot of stuff going on campus.
Perfect time.
Yeah.
Perfect time. So you get your undergraduate degree, and what's the impetus of saying, you know what, I'm going to go to the next level?
To go to do I did my master's at UBC. What made me think I wanted to do that? Well, I do remember saying to my dad, I think I might want to get a PhD, like at the end of my undergrad, saying, I think I might want to go on to do a PhD. And he said, oh, that sounds reasonable. That sounds like a good idea. So, and I said, yeah, I think I like it. I like writing these papers. Like I like doing all this reading and writing papers. And he said, sounds like you like research. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, I think, that's probably something you should do then.
Okay.
And so I applied to UBC to do my master's. I can't remember if I applied other places. I think I applied to UBC. I can't remember. I think I might have applied to some other places too. Anyway, I remember I got into UBC and I decided to do the master's program there. It was like in those days, it was like about a 1-year master's. And that was great. I had a great time. I had a great advisor, John Wood, who's now passed away. He was an amazing Indian politics expert. I studied Indian politics.
Indian politics.
Yeah.
Master.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. See, the thing, and when you're not, and this isn't to belittle anyone that hasn't followed any kind of academic course, the amount of work that's involved at each level is substantial.
Yeah.
Like it's not,
that's true.
Like you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You just, I guess it's like that in any discipline. The higher up you go, you can't fake it. You have to, you really have to really become, what's the word I'm looking for? Like whatever your area of expertise, for instance, in your when you're writing your master's, you have to get completely into it, like really into it. You have to understand it because there's not like I said before, there's not 300 kids in an auditorium sitting there. The classes are smaller.
Yeah,
they're more direct. The requirements are, and you're going to get into deeper discussions about the things that you're going to be writing, researching, learning about.
Yeah. I mean, you're right that it's a lot of work. Sometimes like you can kind of sort of sit back and think about like all the time you spend on something that's very specialized and it can feel like, why am I doing this? Right. Like, I mean, why am I doing this instead of something like that feels like directly impactful? So, I mean, I can see, and I'm sure it's true for any kind of area where it's a discipline and a career, where you're working and working and working on trying to kind of go to the next level. You want to kind of get deeper understanding and better and more expertise, and you're really kind of curious and focused on both, I would say, both curiosity and on excellence. And those are things that's just a labor of love. And whether you want to be an excellent golfer or an excellent tennis player or an excellent, academic, writer, thinker, researcher, all of those things, they take a discipline.
There's no shortcut.
And there's no shortcut. I mean, some people have some strengths and talents and other people don't have those strengths and talents, but hard work is a big part of it. Yeah.
So you're at UBC.
Yeah.
You finish up your master's program. Next.
I decided, my then boyfriend decided to do his master's he finished his undergrad degree a little after me. And he decided to do, we're living together. And he decided to do his master's in philosophy at Dalhousie, which is where my mom lived.
On the East Coast.
And my mom was very keen on me coming home. She wanted me to be back in Nova Scotia. And so the two of us moved back to Nova Scotia for him to do that master's, which he did. He's a professor in Britain now. And when we moved back there, which was fun, we had a lot of fun together. And he had also been an SFU philosophy guy, so we met in philosophy classes at SFU. And as we kind of went to Halifax, I had a great time there. I worked for a consulting firm. I went to the UN to do fisheries negotiations with this really great international lawyer called Evelyn Meltzer, who did law of the sea stuff. I had some other fun things. Worked with Michael Gardner on fisheries policy in Nova Scotia. Just a lot of really fun applied social science research. And we kind of went our separate ways. We had different kind of career plans, and I decided to go down to the States to do my PhD from there. So I decided at that point I'm going to apply to the PhD, and I went from there. So I kind of had the opportunity to kind of stay and do a professional consulting career. One of the partners at the firm I worked at said, if you want to do economic consulting, we could pay for your master's in economics while you worked here. And then you could kind of go on and be a partner in this consulting firm eventually, or, get promoted through the ranks of this consulting firm. And so I was thinking, do I want to do this kind of work? Which was fun. It was very fun and applied. And one of the things I really liked about that consulting firm was that they had an incredible amount of integrity, and they were really committed to providing public information that was valuable and had integrity. And I really liked that. But I just felt like that kind of work didn't challenge me intellectually in a way I felt like kind of rewarded by. And so then when I went on to my PhD work, then I felt challenged intellectually. That was great for me.
So you went down to the University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's right.
How'd you end up there?
Well, I applied to, I was interested in my master's program when I studied Indian politics. I was very interested, I kind of got interested in thinking about gender. Towards the end of my undergrad degree at SFU, I got interested in it, partly because that was the Montreal Massacre.
Yeah.
And, that was a big topic on campus. And I got involved with student organizations. They were, educating other people and giving out information on violence against women. And I was like, wow, this is a big problem, and that was kind of a kind of formative moment for a lot of, I think, Canadian women of my generation. And then when I got more and more interested in kind of thinking about that and thinking, well, why does this happen? And how can we learn more about kind of political science and the politics behind this? And then when I was doing my master's thesis, I was interested in thinking about women in India, where I was studying, and kind of what was going on there, and representation, and sort of India's really interesting for thinking about representation because they have all these special mechanisms, reservations or quotas for women in government. And so I was interested in thinking about those questions and how does that affect minority women, and how are all women represented by just a few women, and things like that.
I gotta interject here. You been to India?
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I have. Yeah.
So
and not recently though.
We
Yeah.
we've been that when you talk about your area of expertise and studies, and I'm not gonna, because we'll go off on tangent.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time about that. There's so much interesting stuff. The world's largest democracy, right?
1.2 billion.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
It is a
I mean, what's not to? It's so interesting, right?
It is.
And you think this is
just
and
when your area of study, when you're talking about women's rights,
yes,
and that place there
is very interesting, so varied across the country.
Yeah.
I mean, and in some ways a lot like the U.S. in that regard, or Canada, in that, if you're in rural Nova Scotia, or like you said, I'm sure, I don't know Manitoba that well, but different parts of Manitoba probably are quite different. Or even in British Columbia, if you're in Vancouver, that's going to be quite different than being someplace in a rural community in the north.
Yeah.
So, or different towns, Alberta. So there's just lots of different variety across the country. So anyway, that's part of the thing that I've been interested in thinking about. Why is there such variety? Why is it in the case that, in Vancouver, or even when I've traveled the world, right, you go to some places, you could walk down the street stark naked in some places and nothing would happen to you. And you can take off your headscarf or, or show too much of your hair or in some places, even in Canada and the United States, I mean, it's illegal to take off your shirt, right? In other places it isn't, it's not in Scandinavia. And so, why do we have such, and the consequences can be dire in some places, right? You can be, norms of, violence.
Right.
That's linked to violence against women, right?
Shit. Yeah.
Or, I mean, even being in Jerusalem, I remember worrying about if we went into the market, you didn't want to go into some parts of the market, without, showing your legs or whatever, because that would induce, violence as well. So, I mean, people who have to navigate these norms know where the dangerous places are, whether they're in Canada or the United States or India or
Well, it's interesting to bring this up because a personal ancillary note to this is when we went to India, and Trisha's sitting right here, and I never felt the same thing she did.
No, yeah.
Because I'm a guy. But we get back to the hotel and she goes, that was very uncomfortable.
It's exhausting.
And I go, what are you talking about? What planet are you on? What do you geez, and then she'd explain to me what, and I said, so did you feel unsafe? Did you feel, and there was a whole, it was there, but, like in India, the women line up in one line and the men line up in another line at the airport.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's odd.
There's just so many differences. And again, it's also different in like, again, in the cities or the areas and behind
the
closed
rulers.
doors. Just so much difference. And again, it's the same, and not the same exactly. Obviously, there are big differences, but the thing I think is so interesting to think about is this variety. Like, why does it vary so much in terms of, like, even, again, cities like Vancouver or compared to other cities? I've lived in much more conservative cities. Vancouver, and you didn't, I think I was lucky to grow up in Vancouver as a young person at the time that I did, because as a young woman, I could do a lot of things and be very free and express myself totally freely in a way that I think hardly anywhere else in the world that I've lived have I ever felt that free. And have I ever been that free as a kind of young woman? And you know, some of that, I don't want to make it sound like, you know, there's violence against women in Vancouver and British Columbia just like everywhere else, and it's a terrible scourge, and we have to do better. But I do think that just that kind of comparative lens about how did we, you know, why do we have these little moments or oases or islands when people are free to express themselves, and how can we capture that freedom for everybody more broadly, you know?
Well, I also have a personal, my aunt used to live in Vancouver. She's passed away, but she moved out here in 1966. She was actually like tomboyish in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Manitoba.
Wow.
But she moved out here, and we used to come and see her. We'd pack up, you know, the old New Yorker, and my sisters and I would all sit in the back seat, and we'd drive from Winnipeg all the way out here. And we're talking like mid to early 70s. So you can imagine what it was like for, like, it was that show, The Wonder Years.
Yes.
That's what it was like.
Yeah.
And my father, who was just ultra conservative, you know, if you wore a T-shirt, for God's sake, woman, you do not go without a bra. Like that, you know, he'd say that. And I'm in grade 5, you know, going, I think Auntie Bevy's cool, man. She took me to see Santana. You know, they searched her purse. She told them to F off, and, you know, and it was cool. And my dad was just like, this is just, you know, but like you say, it was allowed. Like it was, I say allowed. It was just a different cultural.
You see different things.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, you know, goes to your ideas about, like, curiosity and starts you thinking, why is that? Why is it like this? Why can't it be like this in other places? And I think once you feel free, it's hard to go back to not being free, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to accept that you're not able to do just the things you want to do.
So I highlighted one thing here about you're the dean, but you went to the University of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
You got your PhD there.
Yeah, I
okay.
did.
And then you went to Purdue.
I did. I went to teach at Purdue,
To teach at Purdue.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did my dissertation in public and international affairs, which is an interdisciplinary field at University of Pittsburgh. So strictly speaking, I don't have a political science PhD. I have a public and international affairs PhD, which I'm actually quite proud of. I have an interdisciplinary PhD. So, you know, I wanted to get a job, and I guess I could have gotten a job, an academic job. That's what I was seeking. And I, you know, in those days, just like now, it was hard. People were saying, and I did have a lot of people tell me, you're not going to get a job in women in politics. You should study something more, something that's in greater demand, right? Study something else.
Which means traditional.
Well, yeah. And I mean, like, sometimes I got weird advice. Like, I remember one of my professors was like, don't study violence against women, study sexual harassment in corporations. And I was like, what? Why is, you know? Anyway, and he thought, you know, maybe it was good advice, who knows? But at the time, I remember being like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Or don't get stuck in the pink collar ghetto was what somebody said. Yeah, the pink collar ghetto. I still remember that. There's one of my grad student cohort who was like, I don't want to get stuck in the pink collar ghetto, so I'm not going to study women in politics. So I just said, well, you know, I'm just going to kind of have that opinion that I'm going to study what's interesting to me. And luckily, I had a very powerful and smart advisor who basically said to me, study what's interesting to you. And she supported me. So that's really the reason I could do it, I think. So I just decided to do what was interesting to me. So I did my PhD on this area. And in the end, that's what got me the job. So it was a dumb idea. It would have been a dumb idea to switch fields.
What was your dissertation when you wrote for your PhD?
My dissertation was on violence against women. So my dissertation was on what makes governments respond to violence against women. So in some ways, it was this question that I was just talking about, like in the sense that, so coming from Canada, at that time, right, when I went to graduate school, there's a lot of stuff happening in Canada. We have the Canadian Panel on Violence Against Women is traveling across the country. There's a lot of talk. There's this government report that comes out that's called The War on Women. It's using a lot of feminist language. The government is really, conservatives, liberals, everybody, right, is basically accepting that violence against women is a problem in Canada to some degree. There's agreement, Nobody is saying, oh, we don't care about violence against women. None of the stuff that you hear today, we didn't hear that. And then when I went to the States, it was felt like it was like a little bit behind, but it was kind of coming to the O.J. Simpson stuff, and there was the Violence Against Women Act coming out in 1994. So right around the time when I started going to graduate school, you feel like there's all this kind of progress being made in this area. And I happened to go to Norway on a kind of fellowship to study Norwegian politics and kind of Scandinavian politics. And it was interesting to me that while I was there wasn't the same kind of recognition of the importance of violence. Sweden, Norway, Finland. And I thought like, wow, because, a lot of North American people are like, oh, they've got great maternity leave and all these women in government. So it's got to be better, right? Mm-hmm. And in many ways, those things are good. Don't get me wrong.
But what did you find out?
But I found that there wasn't that much kind of attention to violence against women in those days. Still back in the early 90s, they weren't really doing that much. And I still remember calling up, I was doing some interviews for my thesis, which was basically about, well, why is this? Like, how come these places that are supposed to be kind of women-friendly welfare states, why aren't they leading the way on violence against women? Why is Canada and Australia, which everyone was kind of like in the women in politics field, were like, these places don't have maternity leave, they're terrible. It was like, it's not terrible, I lived there. And also, we had a lot of really progressive and interesting ways of thinking about how to address violence against women. So why didn't they come from Norway? Why weren't they happening in Sweden? And there just wasn't, it felt like the public system there was a little bit more resistant to these ideas about violence against women. And in Sweden, there wasn't even really the same kind of demand from the civil society saying, government, you must do something about this.
But it was happening there.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Of course it was.
And so the first reaction was, of course, saying, oh, well, we don't have that here. We don't have violence here, which wasn't true, right? And then the more people did research, the more they did research. Yeah. So feminist researchers did research there and found out that, oh, guess what? It's about the same level as it is in Canada and the United States. Mm-hmm. So now you're like, okay, it's not the level of violence. Why is the democratic government, all democracies, right? Why are kind of governments that you might even think of as neoliberal in some ways in Canada and U.S. doing more on this issue than these, women-friendly welfare states, right? Like social democratic governments led by women, right? In Norway, in some cases, or with women in influential positions. And so this is where my kind of research took off from. Part of what I decided, and this was what my dissertation was about, was that the answer was that it came from pressure from civil society. It came from people organizing in civil society, social movements. And I don't just mean like a protest, and I don't just mean a lobby organization. I mean the full gamut. Mm-hmm. Like, again, going back to what I told you about being in Vancouver, we had the Women in View Festival. Mm-hmm. We had, the Walk a Breast March, where women protested not being able to wear their shirts.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember that.
But this is the kind of stuff that was going on. A wide variety of things. And people in every area. And then people also saying, there has to be some action on violence. And the government taking that up. And so why was that coming? Because it was demanded by people in the public. Mm-hmm. It was demanded by protests people who were pushing this onto the agenda, who were framing this as an issue. And so, people the government representatives, the elected folks didn't feel like they could just say, oh, it's a joke, or I don't care about it. It wasn't left up to them to put it on the agenda. Women and women's movements, feminist movements, protests were putting it on the agenda.
No, that's how the women got the vote, man.
Actually,
no?
Yeah, in BC is very interesting.
Okay.
BC, there was a referendum in which men voted to enfranchise women. Isn't that interesting?
I did not know that.
But it's true that women also demanded the vote. That's true. You're right about that. The suffrage movement demanded the vote. But it's interesting, BC is an outlier because...
BC is an outlier in a lot of things.
It is. It's a fun place to live for that reason.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But go on. So
anyway,
you
so that was my dissertation.
That was your dissertation, and then you obviously you get your PhD.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
mm-hmm. And then I went off to Purdue to start there as an assistant professor. Yeah.
And looking at your background, you've written books.
Yeah.
you're like, you're a real academic, man. Like, and I'll share for our listeners and our viewers, and I know Aaron Hoffman is your husband.
He is.
Okay, and I always thought I was talking to the real deal with Aaron, but you're the real deal.
No, he's the real deal.
You're the academic, man.
We're both academics.
You're both academics, so it must be an interesting conversation you guys have in your household.
Well, I think our children might be able to tell you that they're tortured by our conversations. So you can't have them on. You're not allowed to have them on. They'll tell you all the crazy things we say at the dinner table.
Well, the thing is that's interesting stuff. Like for me, like I do love politics. But there's one thing here that, and I've got it highlighted here. Your area of expertise, ideas to policy outcomes on women's rights, violence against women, representation in public institutions. That encompasses does that encompass everything?
You mean in life?
No, well, I'm not saying in life. I'm saying in your area of expertise and what you focus on.
I guess I would say I'm really interested in change. I'm really interested in how we can make the world better for people. Mm-hmm. For women, I've mostly been thinking about for women, but I'm interested in making the world better for everybody. And so I'm interested in my scholarship in understanding how is it that sometimes we've been successful in doing that. In the places where we've been able to do that, let's look at it. Let's understand what happened. Whether it's institutions, changing norms, as we've discussed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it means you got to try to change people's minds. That's so important for politics.
Yes.
Right? When people say politics, they think about elections and Lord knows those matter. But, it's also about thinking about norms. What do we expect? What cultural differences are there? How do we change that? It's not a given, right? We can change that.
Mm-hmm. So your scholarship, your area, is it focused just on Canada? Is it focused on
So right now, actually, I'm working with UN Women. I have a grant from UN Women to do, I have taken, remember I was just saying about how I felt like civil society and social movements are the key to driving change. Mm-hmm. So my work has been involved in kind of showing, that's partly what I said in my dissertation. Then I did my 2011 book also talked a little bit about this, but also was talking about it more broadly for all kinds of groups that lack power and are excluded. What avenues are open to them? Mm-hmm. Try civil society organizing. Mm-hmm. That's why freedom is important. And freedom and equality are linked. Mm-hmm. And so then in a book I wrote with Malkowich, another person who's passed away, I feel like we're losing a lot of good people these days. Mm-hmm. But Malkowich just passed away last year also. She and I wrote a book called The Logics of Gender Justice, and this looked at 70 countries. So my dissertation, I looked at 36 countries. When Mala and I got together, we looked at 70 countries. She was a Latin American specialist. And then after that, I did a project for the Gates Foundation where I developed a database on 126 countries. Partly this was at the kind of prompting of some human rights groups who wanted kind of to know, could you help us by providing data on a bigger group of countries? So at first I was like, well, we kind of already did that. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't be too hard to help out and do a bigger data set. And so then we ended up doing this study of 126 countries, which has been ongoing, and we're finally doing some of the final publications for that now. Mm-hmm. And then this project with UN Women now looks at even a few more countries, but about the same 120 countries. So global data sets, international processes. I'm interested in those kinds of things, and not just one country.
And what specifically are you looking at? Like, are you looking at violence? Are you looking at
I'm interested in the databases that I've been building, or that our team has been building, are on feminist movements, and that's a very broad and diffuse concept. So concretely, what does that mean? Protests, organizations, institutions like magazines, important activists, journalists, mm-hmm. lawyers, people who create kind of a loose network of people who are united by their ideas. The shared ideas bring them together. Mm-hmm. The shared goals, the shared values. Bring them together in a kind of voluntary organization is the way we would think of it, or voluntary kind of network. Mm-hmm. That becomes a social force. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I'm interested in. So that database is saying, do you have this kind of social force in this country, what kind of a social force is it? Is it largely independent of government, or is it mostly contained in government? Is it a strong, diverse group or not? That's what the database is looking at. And my analysis, when I use statistical analysis to look at these countries, more than 120 countries, looks at the relationship between whether there's a social force like that and whether there are policy outcomes that are addressing violence against women. So going back to our original discussion, right? Like, does the government criminalize certain kinds of policies? Does it provide rape shield laws for women who end up in court? Does it recognize the distinctive problems and concerns that confront women who are subject to violence in their intimate relationships? How do you address that, right? It's a complicated situation. You need special kinds of laws. Are there shelters and crisis centers for women who need a safe place to go? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Sure.
You're obviously you're an academic. What does feminism mean? What does it mean? You're talking to a heterosexual guy here, like a guy, and that's why my wife's sitting here, because she wants me to ask that question, but I want to ask that question too, because it is.
Well, Catherine McKinnon says that feminism is the radical idea that women are human. And she's a radical feminist, or at least self-proclaimed. But I mean, I have written actually a long time ago, I wrote an article in the Vancouver Sun about how feminism is common sense. And I wrote it with my friend, Michelle Crawford, who now works for the government in Victoria. Basically, I still think that feminism is common sense. And what I mean by that is that it's the common sense idea that women and men, or people of whatever gender and sex identities, ought to be treated equally, regardless of whatever else they're doing, and that they're entitled to equal respect and concern, basically, as human beings. So it's just kind of a radical, is it a radical idea? I don't really think it's a radical idea. And whenever I when I like to teach women in politics, I teach a lot about feminist theory. And I think a lot of people don't really have any idea what feminism is. Or if they do, they don't really understand it.
The times we live in, too, are very difficult to understand that. When you have, you had the Prime Minister of Canada saying that he's a feminist. He said that. He came out and said that.
Sure.
And for me, it was a head scratcher. And I don't want to, because we talk about that for an hour, about but the thing is that the trying to nail that down and say, okay, well, this is what feminism, and what you're saying is that feminism is you treat people the same, right? I'm dumbing it down a little bit.
There's another kind of famous feminist, Bell Hooks, who says that, feminism is the anti-oppression principle, in the following sense that, feminism is against oppression. We're against treating people, against dominating people, against preventing people from being free. Right. And I mean, and there's a kind of an equality value and a freedom value. To me, feminism and really kind of the political values worth pursuing, that's what they are. Equality and freedom. Those are the most important values. And I believe that all people are entitled to those things as a kind of human right.
It's as being explained like that, who wouldn't?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of why I think feminism is common sense. So,
but there's a connotation. There's always a connotation with the word and then the way it plays out.
Yeah.
And people's misunderstanding or being uneducated when it comes to trying to understand what does that mean. And I guess, I mean, you asked me what feminism means, and that's like what I think it means and what it means to me. And, there's, if you were to take a course in women in politics, you would learn about the history of feminism. And then you would learn about things like womanism, right? That there are people who don't want to call themselves feminists for a bunch of reasons. And feminism is an English word, right? So if you're talking about other countries, the question is like, why would they use an English word to, kind of represent themselves? And going way back, there's always been a kind of phenomenon where people like feminist ideas. Right? Like they like the idea that should you have more generous maternity leave? Well, sure. Of course.
Right? Should women and men be paid equal wages? Of course. Yeah. Right? For doing the same work, right? Yeah. Or for doing comparable work. Should we value the things that women do, like childcare or those kinds? I mean, everybody thinks that's important, right? So, there's kinds of these fundamental insights that most people agree with. But then when you say, are you a feminist? I think people are a bit more complicated. It's a politicized term, so that's where we find that a lot of people who would agree with everything that most people would think of as being kind of feminist core ideas are reluctant to say, I'm a feminist, because either they don't know what it means, or maybe they think men can't be feminists. Feminism is a thing that women do, or maybe they feel like it means that they have to be, there's some other thing that comes with it that you have to do. They know somebody else who's a feminist who they think does things that they don't agree with, and they're worried that they have to be the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's lots of reasons why people want to dissociate themselves from feminism.
Ask you another question.
I want to say one other thing,
Okay.
though.
Sorry.
This is kind of like, they say this about economists. You have 5 economists, you have 6 opinions. I would say the same thing is true about feminists, right? 5 feminists, 6 opinions, right? Like, there's one of the wonderful things about being involved in a kind of critical movement, like a social movement like feminism or, democracy or whatever, is that people are thinking independently and critically. So they're going to have a lot of different ideas and disagreements. So, there's a lot of contestation over the core ideas. I guess I just want to acknowledge that.
Would you say over the last 25, 30 years that, because a lot of things have happened.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll say the women's movement, but and I don't want to say like from the feminist movement, but there's a lot of things that have changed.
Yeah.
Quite dramatically.
Absolutely.
Like quite dramatically.
So much so. Yes, dramatically. And people don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And
they don't appreciate that you can go back.
Explain that.
Well, do you think, do you mean what happened in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, women in Kabul were going to medical school and law school and whatever, and they aren't today. Yeah. That's for sure. Right now it's illegal to hear a woman's voice in the public square. Yeah. Yes. So it's a terrible, terrible travesty. So that can happen. Yeah. People shouldn't take their freedom for granted. And they shouldn't take their equality and rights for granted. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say because, of course, part of the thing about living in a wonderful established democracy is that you want to take those things for granted because you want to do other stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's very dangerous to take it for granted.
That's like driving in Saudi Arabia. They celebrated the fact that they let women drive. Yeah. And okay. Like that's, serious.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And that's like I consider myself to be a conservative. I do, but that one is, you guys are patting yourselves on the back for that,
or giving women the right to vote.
Yeah, the right to vote.
And you see that right now there's an ascendance of a bunch of ideas in the U.S. where a lot of people are starting to say it doesn't make sense women shouldn't have the right to vote now.
Yeah, of course you would.
So, when we're taking as our, I think you have to take a hard, long look at the mirror when what you're saying is that my ideal world is the world that is the one that's governed by the Taliban. Yeah. When you say to yourself, this is my ideal world, then I think you really have to ask if you're going to go down that road. Because that's the road. That's where the path down this road leads, that a lot of the ideas that are coming out with like women shouldn't have the vote and, all this kind of nonsense. I think it's really... it's a dangerous road.
Do you think we take what we have in the West for granted?
I think we do. And I also think people are not aware of how much things have changed. So on the one hand, things have changed a lot. And I think, you and I both know that things have changed a lot in our lifetime. And we can say, wow, a lot has changed since we were young. If we sat here, we could come up with 50 examples really quickly of things how so different now. So it feels like a time of rapid change. And yet we still don't understand the full degree to which things have changed. I always think of this example, and this is just my own family and life. My grandmother loved the law. She wanted to go to law school. She couldn't. They didn't let women go to law school. She married a lawyer. She kind of lived her life in the shadow of that. She was a very successful person. She ran an organization. She worked for muscular dystrophy and actually set up this whole thing with the firefighters. And when she got to be when the organization grew, they said, it wouldn't be fitting to have a woman be the head of this organization. So they demoted her to secretary and hired a man to run the organization that she built. So she quit. But that was what my grandmother faced. Yeah. My mom wanted to go to law school. Mm-hmm. She was one of 8 women in her graduating class. She, was one of, as I said, the first woman to do this, the first woman to do that. She had to fight to get it. When she applied to Stanford Law School, they told her they didn't have a program for women. She said, I'm not applying for a women's program. I'm applying to your general program. Yeah. So she had that kind of fight the whole time. Mm-hmm. When I went to university, women are majority of law school students now. Mm-hmm. And this is all in a couple of generations. Yeah. So it's a huge difference. Right now, there's tons of women. Women are the majority of university students. They're They're just everywhere. They're doing in every field. They're really contributing a lot. So we've seen so much change with respect to women's status and holding jobs that you wouldn't have believed, serving in deputy prime minister. Look at Chrystia Freeland, you know. Yeah. These are positions that we wouldn't have seen in the past. So that's a tremendous amount of progress. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't go back. And I think at the same time as a lot of people don't appreciate how much things have changed and how challenging it is. Think about it. You know, for your and my parents, interracial marriage was illegal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and here we are in a stage when, you know, things have changed a lot in terms of racial relationships and our commitment to racial justice, our commitment to equality for all people. It's so much different now. And so I think at the same time is like we want to find that sweet spot between appreciating how much things have changed and saying, okay, there's still a lot to do. But we also have to recognize that there's a lot of people who are feeling really at sea. Yeah. They do not know what is going on. They do not know what to make of all the stuff they're hearing about. They don't know what to say when their kids come home from school and are, you know, reporting what's happening. And I think that's the situation that we're in.
At the university, well, when you were at Purdue, how long were you at Purdue for?
18 years.
18 years.
Yeah.
And
18 years in a very conservative American state.
Yeah.
A Republican state. Republican governor, former Republican governor of the state became the president of my university when I was there. Mitch Daniels. Known as Mitch the Blade. Because he was such a devoted budget cutter in, I think, Bush administration. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And how would you describe your tenure there? Like, how would you describe this?
I felt very efficacious there. Uh-huh. Yeah, it was a place where I felt very efficacious in my teaching. So I would teach women in politics to a big class of students, probably 80 or 100. My students would ask me if they could bring their moms or their boyfriends or their friends to the lecture often or to discuss things. I had students would say things like, a lot of the students in my class were from Indiana, and they lived in little towns where they might have one church or, you know, a couple houses. Everything's centered around church. One of my students told me that if you went to church and your skirt was too short, everybody at school would know because it was all the same small town kind of stuff. And then she comes to the big city, West Lafayette, 80,000 people. Mm-hmm.
Big city.
And, and here's her crazy professor talking about things like, reproductive freedom or being able to, what kinds of things would it look like for women and men to have equality? And they were just like, their minds were blown sometimes. And it was like, not because I was saying something that was like really fantastic. It's because I'm just bringing them, kind of the news, right? About what's happening in the world. Like you said, in some ways, like you go to Manitoba and your mind gets exploded, right? I mean, I felt like we were doing that in class. It was exciting and talking about people in different countries and what are different traditional families in different countries and what does it mean to have a traditional family in a place like India or in a place like, Canada or a place like Norway or, all these different places, right? Lots of different traditions. So just to kind of, that was exciting to be able to teach students that kind of stuff.
Do you ever have any protests outside your?
Oh, me? No.
Nothing?
No, that wasn't students. There wasn't a culture of campus protests that much. There were protests on campus that were pro-life protests a lot of the times. So there would be a lot of like organized student pro-life groups, for example. They were pretty well organized. And I had the president of the campus Republicans in my class quite frequently because my class was a required class. Kind of a breadth requirement at the university was to take, like a class on gender or something. And so I would get a lot of the students, engineering school, Purdue, a lot of students who would be like, I have to take a class on women. This women in politics class looks better to me than like women in literature or something, right? So they'd be like, this is going to be my gender thing. So I often would have a class that was majority men. I'd be teaching women in politics to a class majority men. So, when I'd go to talk at conferences to people who are teaching in their classes, and their classes were kind of filled with people who were interested, who signed up because they were like, hey, I've always been interested in women and politics or feminism, and I want to take this class. That's a different group than in my case when I was teaching, a lot of engineers sometimes or people from a wide variety of disciplines who are satisfying their breadth requirement. But I loved it. I thought it was fun.
So you were at Purdue for 18 years.
Yeah.
And then your travels, where did your travels take you to? We went to Montreal, did you not?
Oh, I was on sabbatical in Montreal.
Okay, on sabbatical in Montreal.
I went to on sabbatical in Montreal. I went on sabbatical just before I took as dean. I was on sabbatical at Harvard. But basically, after I went from Purdue, I'm not a kind of person who's a hop around kind of person. I would say I'm a loyal person, and I'm a person who likes to kind of keep their head down and work. So I was at Purdue for a long time, and then I wanted to come back to Canada, but it's not that easy for Canadians in the U.S. to come home if they want to be academics. I wish we would invest more in our universities. They're really important for soft power.
Why so?
And for other things. But anyway, eventually I came back,
Why is it so difficult for...
There's not that much opportunity for academics in Canada. So we don't have as many PhD programs as we should have, unfortunately. So our students that we encourage to go on to do the PhD, a lot of them have their best opportunities in the U.S. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. We should be really, like we're the most educated population in the G7. We should be investing in that strength that we already spend so much money on the kind of knowledge economy, which, by the way, is the way to go. We should really be building on that by investing in our universities so that we're, not sending all of our inventions and greatest minds south of the border. We should be keeping that here so that we're the ones. I was just reading today, like something I hadn't quite finished reading about how patents and innovativeness are basically kind of the core to economic success these days. Why, and we have that, we are the people we have all the educated people. We have the creative people. We have to build on that. We have to increase and keep our creative, innovative, smart people here. We're already training them up. Let's keep them here by investing in universities.
It's a mindset, though.
Yeah.
It is a mindset.
Yeah.
And the fact that if you want to be, the definition of success is, you make it here, but you really make it down in the United States. That's where you're...
Well, there's a lot more opportunity and money there, right?
Yeah.
And you can't make a good living in some fields, right? I mean, you can, and of course, there's lots of opportunity in Canada. I don't mean to say there isn't, but I just mean comparatively. There's a lot. There's more opportunity in the United States, and that we could do more. And I think we would do well to invest in our strong public universities in Canada.
I'm here. Yeah. I believe that too. We started off the conversation on people not valuing a degree in the social sciences. The social sciences get sold short all the time. They do.
I do want to say one thing about that, which is that if you're an economist, you pay a lot of attention to what the market says they value.
Yeah.
The market values social science.
Yeah.
You're saying people don't value social science.
Yeah.
The thing that I find
you're right.
The thing that I find most frustrating as dean is that the public narratives are impervious to evidence. There's no evidence that the social sciences aren't valued by people. So there's this sort of like self-fulfilling thing about like, you got to have skills, you've got to do whatever. All these people who are being replaced by AI, they're not social scientists. They're not even in the humanities. The people whose jobs are going to be perfectly secure are the people who can write something original, all right? And the people who can bring some value to the situation. The people who can write templates are the people who can, kind of even, fix coding bugs or whatever. A lot of these things are things that AI is replacing. We know that in the long run, social scientists, students in the social sciences and the humanities do as well or better than their STEM counterparts. The market does value them. So, I mean, when you look at the outcomes of who gets good jobs, who are the managers, who are the people who are in charge? So when you're a social scientist, you don't come out and go right into a managerial job, but that's where you're going to end up. You're going to end up being in charge. So that's the question. Do you want to be the person who's going to, be an engineer and everybody's different. And I don't mean anybody can be successful, but I just mean in terms of a career path, you come out into engineering, you get a good job as an engineer, but the ladder up is not like an exponential ladder. You're not necessarily going to go out there and for sure become a manager, right? But if you're a social scientist, there's a good chance you're going to be managing that engineer eventually.
Yeah, that's a good point. Leading the faculty in 2026, do you find yourself having to defend the values of the arts and social sciences in today's world? Do you find that you have to defend your department? And I'm asking that question because I think a lot of it is like a lot of discussion and talk is around STEM, is around those types of things. STEM actually for women, like the women to follow that direction. But in today's, like, we're stuck 2025, 2026, you're the leader of that department. Do you ever feel that you have to defend?
I think every dean of every faculty has to defend their faculty. And I would say that I think we can, and I just want to clarify, I think we can use investments across the board. Science, applied science, engineering, social science, humanities, history. We need people in all these fields to help us grapple with the biggest problems that are confronting the world. We're not going to solve a problem of any of the problems we care about, whether it's climate change or how do we deal with AI. We're going to need ethicists to help us figure out what the right thing to do is with artificial intelligence. We're going to need, people who understand what is it about humans that makes us special. The humanities are focused on that. If you think that's something you want to know about. Have you ever read the book Station 11?
No.
Oh, it's good. It's a novel by a Canadian that kind of became very popular. It's coming back to this. In that novel, it's a pre-pandemic novel. And what the author's story is that everyone's laid low is killed off by a virus, basically. Sounds familiar. It was really written before the pandemic. And then in the kind of ashes of the world that comes up, they don't have anybody who's going to run any technology. They don't have anybody who's going to do anything. And the people who are able to kind of make things work are the people who are in great demand, are the people who can make life better than just miserable, right? Like the entertainers and the kinds of people who could play violin, somebody who managed to hold on to a harmonica or something. They are the people who are in great demand and commanding the great respect because everybody's desperate for something that's not just grinding away at life. That's kind of like the pandemic, right? Everybody wanted to, think about, what makes life meaningful and why am I here and read books and watch great movies. And who are the people who are doing those things? Those are all those creative class and the kind of humanities folks that people aren't valuing today. And there's another book that you can read to your kids about Frederick the Mouse, which is similarly about how people are saying, look, I'm working, I'm doing all this stuff. And, what are you doing, Frederick? And Frederick the Mouse is saving up colors and stories so that he can entertain them during the winter months. So in the winter month, they're waiting there and the mouse entertains them. Well, the whole point of this is that I think, I do feel like universities as a whole are not well understood by the public in terms of the value they bring to Canadian society. And that's our job as university leaders to make sure that Canadians understand why what we're doing is a public good, not just the teaching, which is very important, but also the research. How are we contributing to, the kind of well-being of our nation? How are we improving things for British Columbians, for Canadians by being these big research universities? They're important. They're a key element of our kind of soft power as Canadians. They're a key element of our building a democratic society. They're a key element of ensuring economic well-being and a kind of social thriving. We need them for freedom. We need them for equality. So, universities contribute so much, and it's every part of the university that contributes to that right now. In my university, I don't feel that the leadership of my university strongly values our arts and social sciences, so I don't feel like kind of under threat. But I would say that I do feel that a lot of the elements of the university administration are determined by forces outside the university. So whether that's, the attack on international students, or it's the kind of provincial government's funding of so-called STEM seats, which we have in our faculty. So one of the things that's very poorly understood is that the arts and social sciences encompass people who essentially do math, logicians, right, are in philosophy, people who do computational social science. Those are basically computer scientists, and they're in the social science disciplines. Working with big data. I've done research that uses millions and millions of dollars, millions and millions of data points of social media data, and I'm not even the person who handles the biggest data sets in my faculty. Social scientists include those kinds of people. They also include people who do small data, people who do intensive analysis, anthropological analysis of very close, observation of particular contexts. We need that too. We need those big and small social scientists. On the humanities side, we need people who are going to help us understand the value of what we're doing, to think carefully, to understand concepts, and also to tell the very best stories that we can. All of those things are things that we need to be a successful society. and successful as individuals. Mm-hmm. They're both individual level value and societal level value. But we need to do a better job of making sure that Canadians understand that important value of universities.
Are we doing a better job at it than our American cousins?
Well, one thing we have going for us is that our society is more educated. So as I mentioned...
Hear, hear, sister.
Well, it's true. We are the most educated of the G7 countries. Mm-hmm. We have the largest number of people attending post-secondary education. And it matters right now, right? In the world, it matters that we have people that are, trained in critical thinking. I think the thing we have to do is make sure we don't lose the thing we have that's of value, that's distinctively Canadian. We are a nation of people who are critical thinkers. We're able to think carefully about things. That's something that we have. It's hard for me to imagine, when I'm in the U.S. and I'm watching candidates run for public office, or I'm here in Canada, I'm watching candidates run for public office. Different questions, different thing. Mm-hmm. The candidates strike me as being higher quality. The people are asking them tougher questions. I mean, I just think that we are doing, there's a lot of work on education and democracy. Education is important for having a good democracy. Mm-hmm. So if we want to preserve our democracy, we have to continue to make sure that everybody has access to good civic education. Good education in general, but good civic education.
I love it. On that note, Dr. Laurel Weldon, I would like to thank you so much for coming out this afternoon and having this conversation. We could go on for a long. We could. You could.
I feel like we really could.
We could, and I would. Surface. That's right. You did. We did, and that just means that you're going to have to come back. If anyone that's listening or watching wanted to, you have you're at SFU.
Yes.
But I know you do. You said that you're not so much teaching now. You're
can't.
Yeah, your focus right now. You're doing a project with the UN. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's
a research
project that's occupying a lot of time for you. But if someone wanted to reach out to you, you have your own website too.
Yes, on my website.
What is your web?
www.laurelweldon.com.
That's where I found out everything about you. Everything about you.
I have to make sure it's up to date now.
You're going to have to. But listen, we just did scratch the surface. There's a lot more that we could talk about, and I really appreciate you coming out and spending the afternoon with us here. It's been wonderful. I encourage people. The wonderful thing about doing this podcast is Ship of Fools, where wit meets wisdom. I get to embrace my curiosity and talk to people. And honestly, whether or not other people find it interesting, I find it interesting. I mean that, Laurel. I do. I really do. I've been in the newspaper business for a long time. And not to say that anybody's held me back, but I don't believe that we talk enough about these things. We don't. And this is something that was when Aaron brought it up with me, I was, hell yeah, I'm all over this. I would love to, and we could go on for another couple of hours, which means that we're going to invite you back.
Well, thank you. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you, Laurel. Appreciate you.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
You may be asking yourself, what's any of this got to do with me? Absolutely nothing. Until next time.